Hi, let's talk about fire alarm systems. So fire detection systems are built to detect fires early enough so there is still time to safely evacuate people from the building. This is important not only because lives are being saved, but it also reduces property damage and increases the safety of emergency responders. Downtime of a business operation can also be much smaller to the early detection. So, properly functioning fire alarm system is extremely important. And that's just basic introduction. So we have in security industry we have different elements. We have intruder alarms, we have fire alarms, we have CCTV and access control. In general, those aspects. So fire alarms are extremely important because first of all they're saving lives, and then they also save your property if possible, and save your business. Important thing about fire alarms is that they must be installed according to the regulations, which will be different for different countries. Like regulations in UK, for instance, and in Ireland will be similar, but will be more. Other countries will have more different regulations, so certain details will be different. When you installing, maintaining, or operating fire alarm, you must adhere to those regulations under penalty of the law. This course doesn't teach regulations. So way of installing things, way of connecting, types of equipment you're using will be up to you. It's up to regulations in your country. So you have to find whatever institutions and authorities are there and find those regulations. In Ireland, you just buy a PDF for like €50 or so, and you have those current regulations. Unfortunately, they want you to pay for that. I'm not sure about UK or other countries. As I said, there are differences in different countries. They will be similar. Everything will be kind of similar, but different. So because it's related to to law, you have to adhere to your own country regulations. That's why I do not touch even that. I may mention something, but it's nothing to do with what course is about, and you have to do this yourself. Typical fire alarm consists of the following items. So you have a fire panel. So it's the main control unit, which detects, then from detection analyzes what is happening and either triggers alarm or not. Usually it's placed somewhere at the entrance of the building, some main entrance. According to regulations, again, it should be placed in a place easy to access, but the same safe from fire, so fire won't cut off access to that, if possible. So typically, when I enter the building, it is somewhere at the entrance, somewhere behind the door, beside the reception, in the reception, something like that. That's a typical place for the fire panel. Then you have beside the fire panel, so that's main control unit, also called CIE. You will find this in the rest of the course. Then you have manual call points. That's how it is called in the UK and in Ireland. In US and Canada, it's called pull station, because it functions slightly differently. Mechanically, it's different. Internally, it's the same, but mechanically, it's different. So, in Europe, I think Asia and Australia, you just press the brake glass and you're just braking that. Where in US you pull the lever, kind of, and in Canada. Don't have such a equipment, so cannot show you, but you can obviously look at the pictures online if you're not from US and Canada. Then beside manual call, so manual call points are very important because they are if even system will not detect fire automatically, something will go wrong. People seeing smoke will just go pass by the door and press press those manual call points slash pull stations. They usually place again regulations. The place around exits, staircases, and stuff like that. So they're on your way out, and there's usually more than one, unless it's a very small building, small place. Then you have smoke detectors. There are different types. We'll be talking about them. I'll explain a few of them. Are the most common thing which you find in fire alarm systems. If you're doing some small installation like house or very small office building, we have mostly smoke detectors, few manual call points, and maybe heat detector here and there. Heat detectors, obviously, as the name explains itself, detects heat, not smoke. For instance, at home, you would put it in your kitchen, because in a kitchen, it's natural that you produce some smoke now and then. So it is important to not put a smoke detector into the kitchen, because then you will have false alarms all over every day basically. We have a smoke detector in the corridor behind the kitchen, and if we cook something, the door is not closed, it will go off. So heat detectors, detecting heat. CO2 detectors, another type. So when you obviously burning something, CO2 is produced. So there are certain levels of CO2 in the air, and that thing will detect increasing levels of CO2. Flame detectors. So certain places and depending, usually you won't find flame detectors in offices or houses, but you will find them in the industrial installations. So it basically detects the wavelength of the produced by the flames. And then obviously there are others, that are line detectors, that detect beam detectors, there are lots of them, but the most common ones are smoke, heat, CO2, and probably flame. Then you have sirens, bells, well, I should say also beacons. So it will be the thing which will make noise when the alarm will go off, so everybody can hear it. There's again regulations, requirement for also visual, because some people can have impaired hearing. And also sometimes it's easier to notice, especially for the for instance in Ireland, you have the main exit where the panel is, there should be a flashing thing on the outside, so when the fire brigade arrives, they know which entrance to go to. But anyway, so you have sirens, bells. Bells are kind of more traditional, that sound like an old fire station if you watch any movies. So that's the sound. Sirens, just you kind of thing, and the beacons are flashing a red light usually. Okay, this is some very basic view of the installation. There is my mouse here. So you have 2 zones of detection and one line with sounders or sirens. It can be sounders, they can be called sirens, they can be called bells, depending. Now, what is that, you're asking? This is end-of-line device. It could be different for different panels. Usually it's a resistor, sometimes it is capacitor, as you will see in my course. And the panel I'm using in the course is capacitors being used for detection, and resistor for the siren line. This could be called a zone, this could be called an area, could be called line. Really doesn't really matter. That's your alarm panel. Typically we will, in this course we'll be talking about conventional one, So conventional one, you have detectors connected to each other, more or less the way as you see that, and then on the end of the line you have that end of the line device. The end of the line device must be installed because this allows a fire panel to supervise the line. So if there's a fault like a short, break, or missing device, it will be able to detect it. That's why you need that end of line device. Basically how the fire device detection works, how the detecting device works, it puts a resistor so when there's normal state of this detector or this detector, there's no connection between this side and this side. So what panel sees is only straight line of cable and the end of the line device. Moment one of those devices is activated, it puts a resistor between those two. So instead of having clean break between this and this line, one usually is plus, second is minus. Doesn't matter which one is which. Typically I would have minus on this and plus on the one which goes through the device directly. So moment you trigger alarm, like press that brake glass unit, it will connect those two lines with a resistor which is built inside. The same will happen with the smoke or heat detector. The moment it happens, panel detects that no longer can see that thing, but it can see this thing and that thing, it's measuring current going through that line, and then it indicates in here that the alarm is on a zone, whatever, number 1 or number 2. When that happens, a relay in here clicks, and instead of sending low voltage, low supervisory voltage, which won't trigger those sirens, which will just measure if the line is correct, it will switch to the proper voltage, which is 24 volts DC direct current for fire alarms, not like intruder is 12 volts. In fire alarms we're using 24 volts. So moment alarm is triggered, it switches from supervisory into full 24 volt, and it automatically activates all those sirens here. Another thing which you should know, removing any of those devices will cause alert, because you can see this one will have usually have a diode here. So we'll instead of going through clean through that, we'll go through diode. System, if you short a line or cause a break, it will detect because current will change. So it's all operating based on a current. In addressable systems, which we won't be talking about in this course, it's different. It's just devices are smart and they're just sending information through the line to the panel, and panel is receiving information. So it's not measuring voltage, it's data flowing from device through the line to the panel. So much smarter, much more complicated, and much more difficult to work with because we have to program them. The great thing about conventional panels is that you don't have to program them. You just power up. If you connect everything correctly, which I explain in further part of the course, it's working. If your panel was connected properly and it's okay, like from new, if you connect everything correctly, it will work. There's no need for programming or anything. So as I explained, there are two main types of fire alarm systems, conventional and addressable. Usually those conventional will be used in small installations like domestic or small office or like a petrol station. Addressable I use in large installations, which are big buildings, multiple floors, because as you see from that, another thing difference between addressable and conventional doesn't know which device on that line triggered the alarm. It knows only that this zone was triggered. So typically you may have 2, 4 or 6 or 8 zones on such a panel, and each zone, let's say, will be covering some area, and you know which area it is. That way you know where the alarm was triggered, but you won't know exact location because you may have multiple devices on that. On addressable, it will send this device in that room, device number XXX, caused the alarm. So that's why addressable systems are being used in larger buildings, larger installations. You can have multiple buildings even linked together, so it could be pretty big. And basically that's all what I wanted to say as for the introduction to fire alarms. Thank you.